Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I'm your host. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about communication and how communication is a tool, not a weapon. And of course, this is from my own experience. It won't resonate with everybody. But I think those of us who have not been taught how to communicate properly as we've grown up might look at communication as threatening. Especially if anytime you did communicate, you were yelled at or people got upset or people didn't like it or didn't encourage your communication. It feels scary. It feels like communication is somehow violent, right? You're either using that weapon against somebody, or if someone's communicating to you, because maybe you experience a lot of, aggressive or angry communication in your life, it feels like a weapon used against you. However, as I've had to re-understand what it means to communicate and fix my relationship with communication, I've had to look at communication as simply a tool, because that's what it is. Communication is just a tool for you to understand yourself better and to understand other people better so that you can get to a place that you want to be in. You're facilitating something. That's the point of communication. It's also not weak or embarrassing to communicate. And this is particularly for anybody who feels like they have a hard time communicating in relationships or communicating to other people how they feel about them. It's not embarrassing. It's not weak. It is simply a way for you to understand what's happening, to understand where you stand in someone's life, or to understand what's happening in the environment around you so that you can make better, more aligned decisions. That's the point, right? The point is to get to a place where you are aligned in your life, in your experience. That's what communication is for. It's nothing more than that. But I think we create so much drama around the idea of communicating and opening up and sharing. And I know it can be vulnerable. Don't get me wrong. But if you look at it from the perspective of communication is just a tool. It's simply a tool I have in my tool belt to help me build a life that I enjoy. That's it. It's like building a house. Communication is just one tool in that. Communication is not scary. It's not threatening. It's not something that you have to avoid at all costs because you shouldn't communicate. You should just know, or someone should just make you understand. It's like, no. Communication is the tool. If you're trying to build a house without a very important tool to use, how are you going to do that? It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to take a lot longer, and it might not be built to your satisfaction. It might not even be safe for you to live in a house that's not built with an important, necessary tool. That's exactly what relationships are like, and your life is like without communication. And I say this again, this isn't to shame or judge anybody or to invalidate the experience of feeling like communication is threatening, because I understand that. I understand why it would feel that way, especially if you've been conditioned to not communicate properly or to not see communication as important or valuable in the way that it is. But communication is simply a tool for you to facilitate an outcome that you enjoy, that you like. And if you are trying to get into a relationship with somebody, or you're trying to even be in your job, a career, and you're not comfortable with using communication in a neutral way because it's just to understand better. That's simply what it is. It's going to be so much harder for you, as it was for me for a lot of my life, because I often felt like communicating my needs, my desires, my dislikes to people would be threatening. It would push them away. It would make them not like me because I'm not convenient. And I know a lot of people understand this as well. They feel the same way. But that's not what communication is. Now, of course, some people will feel that way. Some people will take it personally in that sense. And I'm not saying that you should communicate, in an aggressive way or to be mean or intentionally malicious. Of course not. The intention should always be, I want to understand things better. I just want more information. And the only way to get to more information is to ask for more information, or to express your information to get more clarity about someone else's. That's it. That's all it is. And I know it's so difficult. It's so much easier said than done to really internalize this, because it's scary to be vulnerable. It is scary to communicate. But honestly, the moment I stopped looking at communication as anything more than just a tool to understand better, it's just what's going to get me from point A to point B. That's it. That's all it is. There's nothing more to it. And yes, someone might take it personally. Someone might think that you're being needy or that you're obsessed with them or whatever, vulnerable things come along with communicating with people. Sure. And that might feel a little uncomfortable. I understand. That's part of life though, right? That there's always that risk. But if you decide to see it simply as a neutral thing and not something that's shameful or embarrassing or whatever, that's all that matters. You get to decide if you feel ashamed about something. You get to decide if you are embarrassed by that communication. That's it. Somebody else will decide for them how they feel about it and if they want to reciprocate communication. So I'm not saying that you communicating is always going to get you the answers you need in life. Some people are not going to be able to give that to you. And that means you're just communicating with the wrong person, right? That's it. It doesn't have to be more complicated or more dramatic than that. And I know, again, easier said than done, but communication is a tool. It's not a weapon. It's not supposed to be threatening or uncomfortable. It is simply supposed to help you achieve a life that you enjoy, that gets you to where you want to be. And without it, things are going to be so much more difficult and so much more uncomfortable because you will always be in uncertainty. You will never know for sure about something. Of course, not all communication is going to give you an 100% answer all the time, but at least you tried. At least you know you tried. At least you asked. As simple as it is, at least you asked. And if that person can't give you the answer, that's the answer that you need, ultimately. If you can ask outright in a clear, concise way, and that person still can't answer your question, that's what you need to know about that person. That's it. And that doesn't even have to be a bad thing about that person. Maybe they're just not in the place right now to be able to give you an answer. Doesn't mean they're bad or wrong or malicious. That's just what it is. And that's what you need to know about where you are right now, because maybe right now you need a specific answer. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you can't get that answer from somebody right now, that means you have to realign into a different direction, because the point of it is to get to a place where you are living in alignment, where you are experiencing a life that is enjoyable for you, that is aligned with you. That's the point of using communication. And that's it. And I know it's so difficult if you are scared to maybe even get the answer from somebody. I get that, but you have to risk it. You have to risk the discomfort. You have to risk getting an answer you don't like. You have to risk being seen as foolish or being seen as obsessed or whatever. You have to risk it. And you have to look at your intention behind the communication as what's most important. That's what's most important, ultimately. The intention. What is the point of communicating right now? If you have no intention behind your communication, then you're going to attach too much to the actual act of communicating. And that's where I think people feel uncomfortable with it. That's where I think people get scared to just simply say what they need to say, to ask for what they need to ask. They feel like they're going to come off a certain way, or someone's going to, look at them weird or whatever, because you have no intention behind why you're communicating. But if you have a why attached to it, it'll make you communicate better because you'll understand what you need to communicate, how to communicate it so that you can get to the outcome that you want. And B, you won't feel like your identity is attached to the act of communicating because your intention is what's guiding it. You're maybe attached to your intention, but not to the act of communicating. So even if the communicating is, embarrassing or uncomfortable, or you're saying something that might make you seem you're obsessed with somebody, whatever, you haven't attached your identity to that. So it doesn't feel as high stakes, right? So this is something that I struggle with a lot. Other people in my life struggle with. And objectively, I can look at it and be like, well, obviously you just need to communicate. And communication is not embarrassing. Who cares if that person thinks you're weird? Obviously, when you're in it, it's a bit harder because, we all have a fear of being rejected or abandoned or whatever, of course. But I think if you catch yourself in this headspace and you find yourself doing this, go back to your intention. What's the intention of me communicating? It's not to communicate. The intention is not simply to communicate and be seen a certain way or to be always saying the right thing at the right time. That's not the intention, right? The intention is to facilitate a life that you enjoy, to get to a place that you want to be from point A to point B. Communication is a stepping stone to that. So if that's the case, how can I communicate in a way that's effective enough for me to get to point B? And how can I just communicate and not care about what necessarily it would mean about me, this act of communicating? That's not what you should be focusing on. It's just about getting information, getting more data so that you can make a decision that's aligned for you. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. If you want to read about these topics, I have a Substack where I write about them, and it's also a great way to support my content if you're interested. You can also follow my social media accounts where I post other content like this. But other than that, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.